Hello friends, now we are in the 10th week with our third lecture on Heinrich Boll's short story Action Will Be Taken. Heinrich Boll is a German writer. We will look at his life, learn about his writings, then focus on Action Will Be Taken with reference to characters and the setting. We will also focus on theme, form, language and literary devices in the story. Then consider human relationships and reflections on life. Most importantly, we will compare Narayan's short story A Career with Heinrich Boll's Action Will Be Taken. Both these stories deal with certain workplace environments which will be of some interest to us. We will consider takeaways and then finally summarize the whole presentation. Let us see the life of Heinrich Boll first. Heinrich Boll was born in 1917 and he died in 1985. He was a German soldier during the Second World War. Then after the war he became a novelist, a short story writer, a playwright and a travel writer. He won the Nobel Prize in 1972 for his writings and became a Nobel laureate. After winning this Nobel Prize, he dedicated huge amount for the cause of humanity and proved himself a great humanist and philanthropist, as a result of which we have Heinrich Boll Stiftung, which means the Green Political Foundation. This foundation stands for the values of ecology, democracy, solidarity and non-violence in many countries of the world, including India. We have Heinrich Boll Foundation in India, in New Delhi. We have given this website address. Anyone interested in the foundation can check it. There are two quotations which we must consider as human beings. The first one is, if the dead could speak, there would be no more war. We come across wars, battles now and then in different countries at different times. As a soldier who had participated in the Second World War, Boll had an understanding of life and he has given this quotation, if the dead could speak, there would be no more war. But the dead can't speak, and so we continue to have wars in different locations at different times for various reasons. The second quotation that we have is, if you want to do something, get up and actually do it. If you want to, start doing it. Don't wait for anything else. Here are some of the writings of Heinrich Boll. These are novels. And Never Said a Word, 1953, The Bread of Those Early Years, 1955, Billiards at 9:30, 1959, The Clown, 1963, Group Portrait with Lady, 1971, The Lost Honor of Katharina Blum, 1974 and lastly The Safety Net, 1979. He was recognized as a great writer in his own times in his own country. Action Will Be Taken is a short story written in German by Heinrich Boll. It was later translated into English by Leila Wanowitz. It has a satirical and humorous tone, but thematically it is a serious story about finding one's true calling in life. What is that we want to do in life? Why do we get jobs? Are we satisfied with our jobs? And how do we come to know about our own true interests in life? This story has some interest for us to learn about our own life. Who are the characters that we have in the story? We have a narrator. He is primarily lazy and he wants to get a job, but he wants to postpone getting a job until he is forced to find it. We also have some fellow job seekers. That means a group of job seekers attend an interview, take a test and then some of them are selected. We have the company owner Alfred Unsidel. He is primarily shown as an active person. We also have a secretary who is also shown as very active. One more character that we have is Broschek. He is the right hand man of the company owner who is also active. So we have these active characters in the company and the passive character in the form of the narrator who is forced to find a job to provide for himself. Now begins our story with this job search. Generally we are lazy people, but we seek jobs to fulfill our needs. Our basic needs we have to fulfill. How do we do that without earning some money for ourselves? So we change ourselves to fit into an organization for the sake of job, even if we don't like the job. But then our original self tells us not to work. The original lazy self will not allow us to work. Sometimes we may find an opportunity to discover our true nature as we are doing some job which we don't like actually. What happens in the story is Alfred Unsindel dies and helps the narrator to display his talent at the right time and at the right place in the right way. The funeral director of a company gives the narrator the job of a professional mourner because our narrator accompanies the dead body of Alfred Unsindel to the graveyard as a mourner. That actually brings out the talent of our narrator. Finally, the narrator is contented to perform his job soulfully. He is very satisfied with the performance of his own role as a professional mourner. Now, before getting the job, there is a test for him. A breakfast is given by the company as a test to the candidates, to the job seekers. Who eats what and how much is all tested as part of this breakfast. Some breakfast items given in the company are eggs, coffee, toast, orange juice. The narrator passes the food test by following certain dining etiquette. The narrator says, I chewed away reverently with the full appreciation of a person who knows he is supplying his body with valuable elements. He did not actually eat all of them. He selectively ate certain things so that he would be understood as a suitable candidate for this job. So further he says, I drank orange juice on an empty stomach, left the coffee and egg untouched, as well as most of the toast, and paced up and down in the coffee shop, pregnant with action. This word action is a key word in the whole story. We have to remember the title of the story is Action Will Be Taken. After the breakfast test, we have the verbal test. There are some questions. So we will look at these questions one after another. The first question is, do you consider it right for a human being to possess only 2 arms, 2 legs, eyes and ears? The answer given by our narrator is this. Here for the first time I reaped the harvest of my pensive nature and wrote without hesitation. Even 4 arms, legs and ears would not be adequate for my driving energy. Human beings are very poorly equipped. The narrator gives an answer to satisfy the ego of the company. The company wants to have people who can work with more than what they can do actually. 2 hands are not enough for the employee to do the job for the company. That's how he understands and he gives answer. Here is the second question. How many telephones can you handle at one time? The answer given by our narrator is this. Here again the answer was as easy as simple arithmetic. When there are only 7 telephones, I wrote, I get impatient. There have to be 9 before I feel I am working to full capacity. Handling one phone is a tiresome job, but see, a candidate is expected to handle more than 7 telephones, and our narrator goes one step further and says he would require more than 9, and that's how the satirical element, humorous element is brought into the story by the writer. We have the third question now to discuss. The question goes like this. How do you spend your free time? We have a fantastic answer from the narrator. He says, my answer is this. I no longer acknowledge the term free time. On my 15th birthday, I eliminated it from my vocabulary, for in the beginning was the act. Remember the Bible? In the beginning was the word. That is the beginning of the Bible. And now our narrator says, in the beginning was the act. Not words, only actions. Naturally, our narrator got the job. So he says, I got the job. Even with 9 telephones, I really didn't feel I was working to capacity. I shouted into the mouthpieces, take immediate action or do something. We must have some action. Action will be taken. That is the reference to the title. Action has been taken. Action should be taken. But as a rule, for I felt this was in keeping with the tone of the place, I use the imperative. the tone of the place, that is the workplace, is like this. So he is using imperative to satisfy the requirements of the company. All words, what really is done, God only knows. Finally, our candidate gets this job of the professional mourner. So he says something about the death and then how he got the job. Action was taken. What was that action that was being done in the company? Finally, the action of the whole story centers on the death of the company owner Unsidel. Action was taken. Unsidel was buried and I was delegated to carry a wreath of artificial roses behind his coffin, for I am equipped with not only a penchant for pensiveness and inactivity, but also a face and figure that go extremely well with dark suits. Apparently, as I walked along behind Unsidel's coffin carrying the wreath of artificial roses, I looked superb. The narrator is happy with himself in the dark suits. I received an offer from a fashionable firm of funeral directors to join their staff as a professional mourner. And so here we have a compliment from the company. You are a born mourner, said the manager. Your outfit would be provided by the firm, your face simply superb. So he gets a job. When he gets a job, he has to naturally resign the previous job. I handed in my notice to Brashek after the death of Unsidel. This Brashek is looking after the company. So our narrator says, I handed in my notice to Brashek, explaining that I had never really felt I was working to full capacity there, that in spite of the 13 telephones, some of its talents were going to waste. As soon as my first professional appearance as a mourner was over, I knew this is where I belong, this is what I am cut out for. That's how he feels extremely happy with discovering the job of the professional mourner. The job is a satisfying job. So he says a few things about the job that he does and how happy he is. The narrator says, pensively, I stand behind the coffin in the funeral chapel, holding a simple bouquet, while the organ plays Handel's Largo, a piece that does not receive nearly the respect it deserves. The Thematic Cafe is my regular haunt. There I spend the intervals between my professional engagements. Although sometimes I walk behind coffins which I have not been engaged to follow. I pay for flowers out of my own pocket and join the welfare worker who walks behind the coffin of some homeless person. From time to time, I also visit Unsidel's grave, the company owner, for after all, I owe it to him that I discovered my true vocation, a vocation in which pensiveness is essential and inactivity my duty. There are two ways of life. One, you remain passive, another, you remain active all the time. Whatever nature is ours, we have to understand and do certain jobs matching with our true nature. That's what the story tells us. As we said, the story is all satirical, it has some humorous element. There are certain companies, there are certain places where action is given so much importance. And so a kind of gentle satire we have on such companies where action is given all importance, where what happens is death, what happens is nothing really. In fact, the character, our narrator, doesn't know what the company produces. That is the kind of understanding that we have from this story. Let's look into the thematic contrast now. As we mentioned earlier, the major theme of this story is the contrast between action and inaction, work and laziness, life and death. Then we have fulfillment in job and frustration in job. Contemplation and action is another kind of thematic contrast. In the beginning was the word, in the beginning was the act. Our writer rewrites the beginning of the Bible. Personal life and professional life, true calling and mechanical work. Certain things we do mechanically without understanding why we do such things, maybe because of the compulsion that we have to get some job to satisfy our basic needs. Let's see the theme of action and inaction in some detail. Alfred Unsidel's factory is vibrant with action. What we see is people are busy. Action is in the air all the time. The employees and owner use action related verbs. They use words which are dynamic. They learn to use the imperative form in different ways. We have many variations, but they are fond of the passive voice. For example, the company is all about action, but the title of the story is in passive form, action will be taken. The title action will be taken is an example, but it is ironical that it is given in the passive form. In contrast, the narrator is made of pensiveness and inaction. That is why we come to know something about factory and the kind of life that people live in certain locations like this. Let us look into the form. Who tells a story? The narrator himself tells a story. The story is in the first person narrative form. We have very few characters in the story. The main character is of course the narrator, who is not given any name by the author. What is the action that is described in the story? Getting a job and resigning it to find out another job, a satisfactory job, that is action. What is the time that is specified? It does not have any specific time, so it may have a few months or so. The story is not very long, it is really a short story, about 1840 words, of course in translation. The structure of the story is neat and clean: exposition, complication and resolution. Exposition, finding a job; complication, not really being satisfied; resolution, finding a suitable job. The tone of the story is ironical, satirical and humorous. We find some fun in the story and then we understand a little more about the kind of life that we live. Let us see the language of the story. Of course in translation we can't really look into the German language. What we have is an English translation. The whole story is full of imperative forms. We have some examples here. Take immediate action, do something, we must have some action, action will be taken, action has been taken in different grammatical forms. Action will be taken, action has been taken, action should be taken, action ought to have been taken, action ought not to have been taken, sometimes in the negative as well. Wunsiedel alone says, let us have some action. Finally, the narrator says, we have had some action. What is that action that has happened? The death of the owner Wunsiedel. That action is given in a simple statement, Wunsiedel is dead. Let us see some literary devices in the story: metaphor, hyperbole and irony. These are the three major devices that we notice. We have the examples from the story. Let us see the metaphorical sentences. I reap the harvest of my pensive nature. Harvest, reaping, that is the metaphor. The story of their lives is more important to them than their lives. You have only to press a button and immediately it is covered with spewed out exploits. Covered with spewed out exploits. Next we have hyperbole. When asked by reporters, when do you sleep, Mr. Broshek? He had replied, it's a crime to sleep. There is no word called free time in the dictionary of the narrator. In the dictionary of Broshek, he says it is a crime to sleep. How can human beings live without sleeping? But there are some workaholics, and this story is a gentle satire on incessant work. Then we have irony here. With Wunsiedel, the most trivial activity looked like action. The way he put on his hat, the way quivering with energy, he buttoned up his overcoat, the kiss he gave his wife, everything was action, everything was work, work, work. There is no real human feeling, there is no sense of being alive as a human being. That is the whole story about. Let us see the human relationships in the story. The nameless character relates to himself, he looks into himself, what kind of person he is, he understands he is a lazy person. He understands his need and the needs of the company. That is how he is able to fit into the company. It appears that he manipulates the answers to the questions asked by the company, otherwise he can't get the job. He exemplifies compassion by attending the procession of unidentified bodies and buying flowers with his own money. At the end we get an indication that he is happy to serve certain people like homeless people. He buys some flowers on his own and he accompanies the coffin to the graveyard. He illustrates the virtue of gratitude by visiting his former employee's graveyard. Now and then he remembers, How did he get the job? Because of that particular role he was assigned by his company to accompany the dead body of Unsidal to the graveyard. He acknowledges that he did not know what the company was producing. This is a greatest irony at the end of the story. We work for some company without knowing what the company is producing. He connects with the right hand man and others well. He is able to mix with everyone at the right time, at the right place, and then find his own true calling. Here are some questions for the topic reflections on life. These reflections are in the form of questions so that each one of us will try to find some answer for ourselves. Why do we seek jobs? Of course, we want to get a job for the sake of getting some money to support ourselves and our family. What tests do we take to get jobs? We take some competitive examinations to pass some tests and then get the job. We attend interviews and then clear some personality type tests and all that. How long do we work in some jobs? Earlier people used to work for a company for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, but nowadays we know that people do not work for a company for more than 2 years or 3 years. They keep changing their companies. What do we do when we do not find job satisfaction? Of course, people change their jobs, but then in many cases they may not be able to change the job just to find a job that would be satisfying for them. How can we know what we are capable of doing to our own satisfaction? This is the biggest question. How do we know what we like? How do we know that we are using our talent, God given or nature given talent, to our own satisfaction and the satisfaction of others? How do we find a job that gives us true happiness? Then we have another question. It's a difficult question to answer. Is our existence a job? Are we performing the role of some worker in our life? Let's compare Heinrich Boll with Narayan. Action will be taken is a story written by Heinrich Boll in German, and we have the English translation. A career is a short story written by Narayan in Indian English. Boll's story is a critique of mechanical work life and workplace. Narayan's story is a critique of deceptive people in business life. When you start a business, when somebody comes to you for a job, if that person cheats you, then how do you run your company? The nameless character in Action will be taken gets a job by telling lies, but is not satisfied with his job and so quits it on the employer's death, that is Unsidal's death. In the case of Narayan, we have a nameless narrator who loses his business because he employs a dishonest fellow called Ramu who deceives his employer, that is the narrator. When we come to Boll, we find that the narrator becomes a professional mourner. He feels happy with his job and remembers his boss with gratitude. On the other hand, in the Indian story, the narrator reaches a good position in life again after many hardships, but he forgives his deceitful employee. The employee Ramu is found as a beggar without eyesight at the end in Tirupati. So, two stories. One story deals with a person who wants to get a job, gets it and then resigns it to get a job that he likes. The other story deals with a person who gets a job, deceives his owner, the employer, and then it is the owner who suffers. Finally, we find that somehow owner of the business is able to establish himself, re-establish himself, and then we find the employee who cheated the employer in doldrums, in difficulties. What are the takeaways from our discussion of Heinrich Boll? Do your job, whether given or taken, to the best of your ability. Sometimes we may get a job, sometimes we may take a job. Whatever job that we do the job to the best of your ability and at least the understanding of the ability that you have. Know yourself and your potential to get the right job. We must look into ourselves and find out what we are capable of. Do not hate the people you work with. Many times when we do not like our job, we hate people who are associated with our job. That happens. People you hate may be the reason for your bright future. Unsidal, for example, is not liked by our narrator, but then Unsidal after his death becomes a reason for finding the true job for our narrator. Even our enemies can also do good things to us unknowingly. It happens in the case of Heinrich Boll's story, and also it happens in the case of our R.K. Narayan's story, A Career. Be grateful to everything. Gratitude is a great way of life. Whatever sufferings we may go through, gratitude is a great way of life. Let's summarize our discussion. We wanted to discuss Heinrich Boll's story, Action Will Be Taken. First, we saw his life and his writings. Then we moved on to read certain passages from the story, Action Will Be Taken. We saw the characters and the settings. We looked into the theme, form, language and literary devices. We also examined certain aspects of human relationships and reflections on life. We paid attention to a comparative study of Heinrich Boll's story, Action Will Be Taken, with R.K. Narayan's story, A Career. As we said, both stories deal with workplace environments where a person is trying to find a job, and what happens when you find a job. Are you true to yourself? Are you true to your job? These are big questions. The writers from Germany and India, they deal with the issues in their own way as they see it. We saw certain takeaways. Do your duty to the best of your ability is the crux of the story, and also being grateful is a good characteristic that we must cultivate in us. Though Boll's story may be ironical, humorous and all that, we find that there is some element of truth in life. Be true to yourself, if not to others. That can take care of us. You can check these references to understand more about Heinrich Boll and his short story, Action Will Be Taken. He has written many such stories. You can read them and enjoy them, of course in translation. If you know German, you can enjoy it much better. Thank you.